Today's report brings us to the heart of a confrontation that carries grave implications not just for the Middle East, but for global stability. Iran is now levelling some of its most explicit threats yet, directly aimed at Israel and the United States. In Tehran, President Masoud Pezeshkian and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei preside over a regime that says it is prepared to launch up to 2,000 missiles in one wave if necessary, a warning delivered with unmistakable force. Israel, under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, faces the spectre of missile barrages that could overwhelm its sophisticated defense systems. It all began with strikes. Iranian leadership say they were responding to Israeli attacks on Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. Israel insists such actions were necessary to prevent Iran's nuclear program from reaching weapons capability. Now the cycle spins out of control. In June 2025, Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones at Israel in the most intense direct confrontation to date. Israel, for its part, has launched airstrikes across the border and inside Iranian territory. In this context, Iran's language has grown ever more ominous. Officials in Tehran claim their missile factories are operating 24/7 and say that their next strike will be designed not just to hit Israel, but to overwhelm its defenses. We will launch 2,000 missiles at once, they say, a figure meant to shock and intimidate. Israel, already vigilant, is reportedly analysing how its layers of missile defence, including the Arrow, David's Sling and Iron Dome systems, would fare under such a barrage. The message from Tehran, the next war won't be like the last. In a sharp escalation, Iranian officials have told Washington and Jerusalem, step back or face dire consequences. One foreign ministry spokesman declared, any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region. This is a warning specifically directed at the United States, warning that its involvement could expand the conflict far beyond Israel-Iran bilateral hostilities. Tehran also emphasizes that Israel's ongoing operations against Iranian proxies and installations will be answered. A senior diplomat warned of apocalyptic retaliation if Israel crosses certain red lines. In making these threats, Iran is signaling several things. First, that they believe the military equation is shifting in their favor. Second, that they want to deter further Israeli or US actions. And third, that escalation now is a strategic gamble they are willing to take. From Jerusalem, Prime Minister Netanyahu has responded with defiance. He speaks of protecting Israel's existential security, of having no choice but to act. At the same time, his government is bracing for the possibility of a long war. Israeli defense officials say they are prepared for sustained missile fire and uncertainty over whether Washington will step directly into the conflict. Netanyahu does not refer publicly to the full scale of Iran's 2,000 missile threat. But Israeli intelligence is reportedly modelling worst-case war scenarios. In effect, Israel is signalling both readiness and deterrence, ready to defend, but also warning Iran that any strike will provoke a response. For Washington, the situation is a minefield. On one hand, US forces and bases in the region are exposed to Iranian strikes or retaliatory actions. On the other, the United States is under pressure to decide how far it is willing to back Israel with direct involvement. Tehran warns that stepping in would expand the war. US officials publicly say no decision has been made yet on whether American forces will engage directly. President Donald Trump has stated he will decide within 2 weeks whether to insert US military power into the conflict. Meanwhile, US intelligence agencies and Homeland Security departments are sounding alerts about potential missile or drone threats, cyber attacks, or retaliatory attacks by Iranian proxies. When Iran says it is preparing to launch 2,000 missiles in one salvo, the numbers are as symbolic as they are tactical. Historically, Iran's direct missile strikes on Israel have been far fewer. The June 2025 attack involved hundreds of missiles and drones. By leapfrogging to thousands, Tehran is signaling a shift to mass strike readiness. Analysts say Iran's missile factories are now operating continuously, and some diplomats suggest the aim is to saturate Israeli defenses, deplete missile stocks, and undermine the deterrence equation. For Israel, whose air defenses are sophisticated and integrated, the challenge is whether they can sustain such an intensive exchange. If Iran truly achieves a capability to release thousands of missiles at once, this could stress the Israeli system beyond past tests. For the United States, which protects many of Israel's advanced defense systems and has personnel and assets in the region, the risk of being drawn in rises sharply. The danger is not contained to Israel and Iran. Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have been watching closely. Regional Sunni Arab states now feel threatened that Iran's next strike could target their territory. A recent analysis described the same Iranian missile threat now facing both Israel and the Sunni Arab states. In Beirut and Damascus, Iranian-backed militias stand ready. In Iraq and Yemen, Iranian proxies escalate attacks on US forces and regional shipping. Any new war between Iran and Israel could draw in multiple fronts: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, the Arabian Peninsula, and risk a broad regional conflagration escalation to war. Iran may follow through on its threat, launching thousands of missiles at Israel and possibly US forces in the region. Israel responds with comprehensive airstrikes deep in Iran or on Iranian proxies. The US, if drawn in, might escalate further. Deterrence holds. The public threats serve their purpose. Iran signals readiness, Israel increases vigilance, and neither side crosses the high threshold for all-out war. Diplomacy creeps back in, perhaps under US mediation. Limited war extended. Skirmishes, missile strikes, but framed as limited in scope. Both sides hit, but avoid full-scale mobilization. The region remains volatile, but direct conflict is contained. Iranian leadership: we will launch 2,000 missiles at once, and tracks reported in press. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman: any American intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war in the region. Israeli leadership pledging to act with determination to block Iran's nuclear program and missile threat. These declarations play a dual role. When one side threatens, it is both a warning and a strategy. Iran wants to deter Israel and the US from further strikes. Israel wants to deter Iran from pursuing missiles unchallenged. The interplay of threats, capability, and perception defines this moment. Beyond the immediate Israel-Iran axis, this confrontation underscores shifting power balances in the Middle East. Iran's missile program appears to be entering a new phase of readiness, moving from proxy wars and indirect conflict toward potential direct confrontation. Israel's strategic calculations now have to consider not only its long-standing threats from Hezbollah and Hamas, but a direct Iranian missile threat that could strike at home the United States once the guarantor of regional security is being challenged to clarify how far it is willing to go. The ambiguity is part of Iran's strategy, keeping Washington guessing. Regional allies of the US and Israel, Gulf Arab states, NATO partners, European capitals are drawn into the calculus. Their deterrence, their alliances, their posture all become factors. Amid all this geopolitics, the human risk escalates. When missiles are threatened in the thousands, when hospitals may be within range, when civilian populations, Israeli, Palestinian, Arab, are in harm's way, the cost rises exponentially. A hospital in southern Israel, one of multiple civilian facilities, was struck in June 2025 during the direct missile exchanges. The fallout from such strikes may include casualties, disruption of healthcare, mass panic, displacement. There is also economic risk. Insurance premiums for shipping in the Gulf, oil price spikes, infrastructure damage in the region, refugee flows, all potential consequences. A war truly involving missiles from Iran aimed at Israel and possibly US bases could ripple through global markets and alliances. Missile launches: when, from where, with what trajectory? If Iran launches a large-scale barrage, the moment of truth arrives. Israeli counterstrikes. The scale and target of Israel's response will signal whether deterrence still works. US decision-making, whether the US intervenes directly or stays behind the scenes, will shape the course of the war. Regional alignments: will Gulf states or other regional powers enter or support one side? Diplomatic moves: are there signs of back-channel talks, ceasefires, or mediation? Or is the rhetorical tempo rising instead? We are at a critical juncture. Iran's threats to unleash 2,000 missiles at once are not mere bluster. They reflect a shift in capability and posture. Israel understands the threat and is preparing for the possibility of war. The United States, while publicly cautious, carries its own risks of entanglement. What happens next could define Middle East security for years ahead, whether a catastrophic war or a tense but contained standoff. What remains clear: Both Tehran and Jerusalem believe that they have reached a point of no return. Iran believes its missile deterrent must now be credible. Israel believes the time to act is now, and the rest of the world watches closely.